This is a Fox News alert. New questions for the White House about remarks President Obama made after meeting with one of the world's few communist leaders. Welcome to America Live. I'm Shannon Bream in for Megyn Kelly. Yesterday, President Obama sat down with Vietnam's president for a rare White House meeting. The two leaders discussing ways to advance our relationship. Afterwards, critics say President Obama appeared to compliment Vietnam's late communist dictator Ho Chi Minh. As President Obama pointed out, the Vietnam War-era leader was actually inspired by none other than our founding fathers and documents. Listen.
The President Sang shared with me a copy of a letter sent by Ho Chi Minh to Harry Truman. And we discussed the fact that Ho Chi Minh was actually inspired by the U.S. Declaration of Independence and Constitution and the words of Thomas Jefferson. Ho Chi Minh talks about his interest in cooperation with the United States, and President Sang indicated that even if it's 67 years later, it's good that we're still making progress.
Joining me now, Fox News digital politics editor, host of Power Play on FoxNews.com Live, Chris Stirewalt. Chris, I'm guessing those remarks are not going to go over well with a whole lot of folks.
Well, certainly for the families of some 60,000 Americans who died in theater in Vietnam, no. But things are different today with Vietnam, obviously. Things are very different even than they were a decade ago. And though they have a McDonald's and they make a lot of sneakers, they are still, as you pointed out, one of very few communist nations. And they do still revere Uncle Ho, as they call him. He has a, just like Lenin did, a glassed-in mausoleum in the city that bears his name. He was also a mass murderer. He was a butcher. Some estimates say as many as 500,000 of the Vietnamese people were slaughtered as part of his effort to consolidate power as a Leninist, Marxist of the real deal. And when he was writing that letter to President Truman, he also happened to be hanging out with Joseph Stalin and getting the Red Army to train his army so that they could do things like put peasants into re-education camps who complained about the taxes and kill those who protested or caused an uprising. That doesn't exactly sound like Thomas Jefferson's jam right there.
No, it doesn't. And with that in mind, what do you make of these remarks? Was it a slip of the tongue? Was it a prepared and calculated, and there was a decision made to make this specific reference? Whose benefit was it for?
Well, it seems to be one of two things. Either it's a gaffe, and the president doesn't know, or didn't know, he probably knows now, but didn't know who Ho Chi Minh really was or what he did. He may not have studied that or been much aware of it. I have no idea. The other possibility is that he was being morally flexible and facile to make his guest feel at home, to say something nice, and that he got carried away in saying that in any way this guy who was really this butcher and his regime that followed after him, he died in '69, the regime that followed after him, cruel and brutal reprisals against the Vietnamese who had helped us. So he may have gotten carried away. He's been out on the trail, campaign trail, for the past couple of days. He may have gotten carried away rhetorically in trying to make his guest feel at home.
All right, we have some reaction from Pete Hegseth. Our viewers may be familiar with him, Chief Executive Officer of Concerned Veterans for America. He says, ask any Vietnam veteran whether in Ho Chi Minh they were fighting a brutal tyrant or the intellectual descendant of Thomas Jefferson. The answer will be nearly universal. While the war was difficult, the question of whether Ho Chi Minh was merely a misunderstood Democrat was never in doubt. He was a communist dictator obsessed with consolidating power. The president's statement is naive, counterfactual, and just plain pandering.
Well, let's remember, we're getting ready to celebrate the 60th anniversary of the other major U.S. conflict of the Cold War in Korea. And for much of America, these are forgotten conflicts. And the fact that some 100,000 Americans gave their lives in these conflicts in Asia is often forgotten and is often overlooked. So the president may not have top-of-mind awareness about this. But as you pointed out earlier, for a lot of Vietnam veterans in this country, the idea that this was a mix-up, that the reason we fought the war was a misunderstanding, whether you think the war was right to fight or not, but that it was a near miss if only Truman and Ho could have gotten it together in those days, will ring offensive, I'm sure.
All right, we'll stand by to see if we hear some reaction or clarification from the White House. In the meantime, Chris, thank you very much. Have a great weekend.
You bet.